Good morning, Year 4. I hope you had a lovely weekend. It's English time. It's Monday, the 25th of January 2021. And your LO today is to use fronted adverbials to describe Howard Carter's quest. Can you pause this while you write down the long date and the LO, please? I think you will all have seen this before, and it might be useful for you to take a screenshot of this and paste it into a Word document if you're using a laptop, so that you've got it there to refer to. Alternatively, you can just rewind the video and pause it if you ever want to use these. So these are fronted adverbials. There are thousands of them, but some are here, and these are some really useful ones. They are about time, so you've got in the time column examples like soon, later, on Tuesday. So that's a way of beginning a sentence so that the reader knows exactly when something's happening. Then you have frequency, which means how often something happens. So we've got things like constantly, regularly, rarely, yearly. Okay, again, the beginning of a sentence telling somebody something about what was going to happen, how often it would happen. In the middle column, we've got place, so above the clouds, below the sea, back at the house. So you recognise that is a really commonly used fronted adverbial in stories, the way the writer tells you where you are now. So a chapter might often begin with a place adverbial, like somewhere near here, or once upon a time, a long time ago, in a land far, far away. Manner means how something is done. So the adverbials in the manner column are things like badly, slowly, silently, curiously. They tell us how things happen. And finally, in that fifth column, you have degree, how much something is happening. So we've got things like nearly asleep, maybe, just arrived, trembling with excitement. So you can use those to refer to. And as I say, it might be useful for you to take a screenshot. I'll try and make myself a bit smaller so I'm not in the picture. Okay, so your job here is to match up the fronted adverbial, which are these here, with the sentences over here. I've done the first one for you. Long ago, in the land of the pharaohs, a great mystery was buried in the sand. Right, so you need to read through. We've got everywhere he looked, mysteriously, sometimes, and trembling with excitement still to use. And we have these sentences. King Tut died aged 18 or 19. People just won't give up trying to find things out. He just found rocks and sand. The treasure was still hidden. And the Egyptologists broke through the wall. Okay, so just pause this while you're working out how to match them up. Here are your answers then. Long ago, in the land of the pharaohs, a great mystery was buried in the sand. Mysteriously, King Tut died aged 18 or 19. Sometimes people just won't give up trying to find things out. Everywhere he looked, he just found rocks and sand. The treasure was still hidden. Trembling with excitement, the Egyptologists broke through the wall. So you can see that I'm starting to tell a story and that I'm using these fronted adverbials to hook my reader in and tell them how things were happening. A Year 4 expectation, something you must be doing now, is adding commas after your fronted adverbials. So always put those in. They have to go there to separate the fronted adverbial from the rest of the sentence. Okay? Make sure you remember those. So mark your work, make any corrections you need to, and then we'll move on when you've finished. So last week we made a biography of King Tutankhamun. We were using this book, The Story of Tutankhamun. We're going back to that book, but we've finished with the story of the king because he's dead now. And now we're moving on to the mystery. And this was an obsession for lots of Egyptologists, archaeologists and historians. They knew that there had been a boy king. They had read and found evidence that he'd been buried with treasure and vast amounts of gold, and it was all very mysterious. No one knew who his tomb was, so lots of people wanted to find it. And we're going to be talking about Howard Carter, the man who eventually managed to do that. So starting to read now. More than 3,000 years after the mysterious death of King Tutankhamun, Howard Carter was born in England. Strangely, he would become a huge part of King Tut's story. Howard missed a lot of school due to illness, but his father encouraged him to know and love Egyptology. He became the Inspector General of the Monuments of Upper Egypt. Now you can see a map here. We've got Egypt, we've got the River Nile running all the way through it, very famous river. We have our pyramids, which we haven't discussed in history yet, but we will. And we have the Valley of the Kings, which is going to be very important. Okay, now all of this area was being dug over and sifted through by Egyptologists, trying to find treasures and history and artifacts from the days of the ancient Egyptians. Now, after a while, while Howard Carter was in Egypt doing his job, he met someone called Theodore Davis. Theodore Davis had the rights to all the archaeological digging in the Valley of Kings, and everybody thought that's where King Tutankhamun's tomb probably was located. But Theodore Davis did not get on with Howard Carter, and he wouldn't give him permission to go digging there. However, when Howard Carter got to know Theodore Davis, he found out a lot about Davis's research into King Tut, and he became very interested in finding the treasure himself. I'm going to show you the fronted adverbial. Frustratingly, Howard could not get into the Valley of the Kings to investigate. Howard became obsessed with finding King Tut's tomb. For years and years, Howard desperately searched. He was looking for information, he was trying to get the rights to dig in the Valley of the Kings, and it took a long, long time and lots of research. He wanted to know 3 things. Where was the tomb? If nobody else had found it, was it full of treasure? And would he become a world-famous hero? Well, we already know that Carter fell out with Davis, but then when he went to his next job, he fell out with his next employers and got fired. So that meant that Carter was in Egypt without a job. And what he did to survive and get money was sell many of the artifacts that he discovered in his time in Egypt. Now, I don't know if you remember, we talked about how the museums are full of things that people have taken from Egypt. These days, we wouldn't be allowed to just dig things up and sell them. But Howard Carter got away with it, and that's how he managed to find enough money to survive this period in his life where he had no job because he kept falling out with people. Things got better when Carter joined forces with the Earl of Carnarvon. He was a very wealthy English aristocrat. So that means somebody who's quite rich, usually a lord or an earl, who had been left weakened by a serious motor accident. Carnarvon spent his winters in Egypt to escape the cold, harsh weather in England. Carnarvon first took up Egyptology as a pastime, that means a hobby, but he quickly became hooked on excavating and realised that he needed the help of an expert. Here you can see a picture of Howard Carter. He's saying, "I am Howard Carter. It is my skill and knowledge which resulted in the discovery of the tomb of Tutankhamun." Here's a picture of Carnarvon. It was very important because he had the money to do the digging. Carnarvon met Carter and they got on well. They both wanted to work in the Valley of the Kings, where Carter was itching to search for Tutankhamun's tomb. However, he couldn't, as Davis still owned the concession. So that means that Davis wouldn't let anybody else go digging there. He owned the rights to be digging in that region. Carter became even more impatient when he learned that Davis had found a blue funeral cup bearing Tutankhamun's name. And the speech bubble says, "I am George Edward Stanhope Molyneux Herbert, 5th Earl of Carnarvon, titled Lord Porchester until 1890, known as Porch to my family. See, I've got as many names as any pharaoh. It is my money which paid for the excavation which resulted in the discovery of the tomb of Tutankhamun." Down here I've got an example of a describing sentence using a fronted adverbial. In a change of fortune, Carter met Lord Carnarvon. They got on well and, as a team, were determined to find King Tut. Finally, in 1914, Davis, now old and ill, gave up his concession and Carnarvon was able to buy it. So that meant that Carnarvon now had the right to dig in the Valley of the Kings. The outbreak of World War I slowed things down, but over the next few years, Carter began his search for Tutankhamun's tomb, clearing the valley down to bedrock using a Decauville hand-operated railway. And you can see that in the picture. You've got people wheeling carts along on the tracks. They're digging out tons and tons of rocks and sand. And where it says clearing the valley down to bedrock, that's the rock underneath all the loose sand. So we're going down to thousands of years before. The war ended, but costs had mounted, and with nothing to show after almost 10 years, Carnarvon told Carter he couldn't pay for any more excavation. Carter offered to finance one more season himself. Faced with Carter's determination, the Earl gave in and footed the bill for one last dig. So when you foot the bill, that means you pay. So he paid for one more chance to find the tomb, even though they dug for so long and hadn't found anything. Tomorrow we will read on about the discovery, but just today I want you to finish off the lesson by doing a quick task, a written task. So you've got to describe Carter's quest using fronted adverbials. That was our LO today. And you've now heard about a little bit about Carter's quest and how determined he was. So if you're doing spicy work, I want you to do questions 1 to 5 and fill in the gaps. So you've got sentences to complete here. And over here, these are the fronted adverbials you can choose, unless you want to do your own, of course. So you might say, luckily, Howard Carter wasn't well as a child, so missed lots of school. But I don't think that one fits, so maybe choose a different one. Maybe that one's unfortunately, Howard Carter wasn't well as a child, so missed lots of school. So that's what you're going to do. Go through, find the right kind of adverbial to go in each of these places and write out the sentences. Please don't forget to use the commas after the fronted adverbials. They're in there for you and they're really important. And apart from the names, we shouldn't be having any capital letters in the middle of sentences. So can you just change that to a lowercase h, please? It's all right to have the capital letters for the names in all the others. Okay, if you're doing spicier or spiciest, I'm expecting you to do your own sentences. You can have a look at these to give you a helping hand and help you remember the story. You can also go back through the video and you can go back to the screen where I showed you all those fronted adverbials and you can start to use some of those. So you're writing your own sentences, aim for at least 5, to describe Carter's quest from childhood to the final dig. As always, it would be great if you would take a picture and send in any work you've done. Good luck with that. I hope it goes well. It should only take you maybe 10 or 15 minutes to do, and I will speak to you again tomorrow. Bye.